All right, so I'm logged in here into Project Online. Project Online is part of your Office 365 set of applications, and it's all together in the same experience. You use the same username and password that you may already use for other applications in here, and it works really well just out of the box with all of these other applications. As an example, if I was to upload a document within Project Online, I can access that document right from within OneDrive. Or if I want to do some reporting on the Project Online information, I can do that right within Power BI, and we'll actually see a little bit of that later on as we go through here today. So what I'm looking at right now is a list of all the different projects that we have going on. Now, some people are going to use different terms for these, especially if they are Agile projects. Maybe one of these projects represents a particular epic or a particular program or whatever it might be, however you want to break this up. But I can come in here and I can see a list of all of the different buckets of work going on and the status of those. So we have some high-level KPIs, overall health, schedule health, work health, et cetera, et cetera. Up front, when we put in new requests for new work into the system, new projects, initiatives, whatever they might be, then we can come in and we can do some very high-level top-down planning. So at this point, I'm not yet going to build a detailed project schedule. I'm not yet going to go and build a full backlog of user stories, task bugs, etc. I'm just trying to understand at a high level, what's it going to take to do this project from a resource perspective. So meaning, how many people or teams is it going to take and for how long, that kind of a thing. And so right through here, I can do that piece of it. I can build out that high level resource plan. I'm not putting any tasks in. I'm just saying, okay, I think I'm going to need Kono for a certain period of time, and you can plan that in hours or in percents or in FTEs, so on and so forth. And if I don't even know yet who's going to be working on my project necessarily, I can just say I need a developer. So you can start with generic resources and then possibly replace those later on if needed. So that allows me to high level understand better, the resource requirements for this project. Then I can come in and I can do more on the financial or the budget side of things. And I can come in and I can build out my high level budget here. The very first thing I can do is hit import, and that's going to pull in all my labor costs automatically for me based off of that resource plan that I just created. And we would set up some blended rates here, and so that when it imports in, it can do all the calculations for you, save you some time and some extra calculations there. And then from there, I can key in any of my other costs, things like materials and supplies, travel and expense, so on and so forth. And it's just a online Excel spreadsheet is the best way to think of this. Later on, you can start to then track other types of costs. Once this project actually starts after it gets approved, like I can update then my forecasts, I can track actuals and possibly even revenue, benefits, those types of things if needed. But this is all configurable, so we can set this up to match the cost categories that you want to break up your costs into and the cost types that you want to track, as you're managing these different projects. Right now, I'm looking at this by quarter, but I could also break this down by month or roll it up by year if I only need to see budgets per year. So we can do this at different levels of detail as needed. What this provides is if you have both Agile and waterfall projects, we might have a mixture of projects that are, we're going to eventually go execute on once they're approved. This provides a common way to identify what resources we're going to need and what financials we're going to need before we go and approve these projects to say, yes, go ahead and start doing it. Then when we start actually working on it later, once it's gone through the stage gate and or approval workflow process, that you set up and put in place here to put some governance around this, later on then might be when I start to go build out all of the actual details and then get into execution, more bottoms up side of things. To do that, I can use Microsoft Project and or I can use the online planner that's built right into Project Online, and I can build out more of a traditional waterfall schedule here, and that can be a very simple high-level schedule. You can start from templates, so you have some best practices pre-built. You don't have to build these things from scratch every time. And or they can be more detailed with multiple levels of tasks down to whatever level of detail necessary. On the other end, if you're using a tool like Azure DevOps or Jira or whatever your Agile tool of choice is, we can integrate up with that system and we can set it so that we can pull in the relevant information from over there. Just like I could go into Project Desktop, build out my schedule and publish it in, I can go out to Azure DevOps, build out my backlog, of my different features broken down into user stories, tasks, bugs, etc., and let that all roll back in so I still have a view of all of the detailed work that's been planned, and then let that roll all the way back up to the project and into the different reports and dashboards and such that we'll see in a second. So that's more from the project manager and or scrum master or whoever's, really managing this project from a resource, financial, and schedule perspective. One thing that we find is even if you're connecting up to an Agile tool and you're managing this project in an Agile way, a lot of times people still end up keeping a separate project schedule or release plan or release timeline, if you want to call it that, separately from the backlog items. The reason being is most people only plan out a sprint or two ahead, so it's really hard to tell exactly when you're going to be finished. You can look at burn down reports and things like that. That's assuming that you have everything already in the backlog, and as you're going through the Agile process, a lot of times you're continually adding things as you get feedback from stakeholders and ideas and so on and so forth. But if you want to then be able to present back to the business and to stakeholders and customers and so on and so forth of when we think we're going to say get the version 1 of this new product out or this new feature or whatever it might be, you can actually use both the backlog tab and the so-called schedule tab to have maybe a high-level release plan of just when we think things are going to get out the door to better communicate that in a simple way. So you can actually have both at the same time if you choose to do so, a hybrid scenario if you want to call it that. So, everything again starts out the same up front. It's until you get to the execution you decide if you want a waterfall schedule or if you want to use an Agile backlog out of an Agile tool or a little bit of both. Up to you. You have the ability to do all of that. From there, I'll go into my portfolio view here. And what we can see is there are many different work buckets, initiatives, projects, programs, etc., that are going on here in the system. And within that, we can do some analysis and figure out where issues are, and we can use this up front both for selecting and figuring out what we're going to do and when we're going to do it, starting to build out our roadmap, as well as we can use it later on to see where the issues are and where we may need to make adjustments to account for both financial resource issues, so on and so forth. So the first thing that you might notice here when I come in is that I have lots of different projects. You'll see some status on these guys, estimated budgets, benefits. We can do more traditional scoring on these from a priority perspective to get a prioritization score based off of drivers, and or we can do more modern, say, prioritization scoring methods like WSJF, weighted shortest job first, which is what SAFE recommends from a scoring perspective. I have them both here right in line, and so what I can do is when I come in and I want to do some prioritization, if I need to kind of reprioritize my portfolio at any time, I can flip into prioritization mode and I can look at all of the metrics in the view here that are of interest to me for when I'm doing prioritization. I may include other things like ROI or NPV or IRR, more financial metrics, whatever I might want to include in this view. And then I can come in and simply just start dragging and dropping things. So I can come here and drag and drop and move these around just to stack, rank, reorder them to get some prioritization around these guys. From there, I can also create some dependencies around them if need be. So I can come in and you'll see here that there are dependencies set up between these different projects. So we're not talking task level dependencies, we're talking project level dependencies. And I can view this by month or by quarter, whatever level of detail I want to view it at. But I can create those dependencies, and some of these projects, notice, are actually Agile projects. And you notice the icon here, this one in particular is being managed in Azure DevOps. Other ones are being managed over in Project Desktop. Some are in Office 365 Planner, so on and so forth for the execution side of these things, but I still have one view with all of them together, including my dependencies and so on and so forth. Adding another layer on top of that, what if I want to know how we're doing from a resource perspective, if we have any issues there, if there's any conflicts? I can come in and I'm going to actually expand this into full screen mode so we have a little more room to work with here. And I can come in and I can turn on the resource planning module below this and kind of overlay that. And so now, okay, here's my roadmap of all my different projects and everything that's going on. And I want to come in and see how we're doing from a resource perspective. Who's working on what, who's over allocated, so on and so forth, and I can make adjustments to that, and so on and such. The same thing then I can do on the cost side of things. I can come in and I can look at my total budget and how all of these are and what's going on here, and see that all roll up and see where I have hotspots and then make adjustments and so on and so forth. At the same time, I can flip to other views. So there's different ways I can look at this. So for example, if I want to see a Kanban board of all of my different projects, initiatives, etc., I can come in and I can see all those laid out on a Kanban board, and I can organize this many different ways. Right now it's organized by business units. I could change that by state, not started, in progress, completed, etc. I can color these tiles with on the board, or sticky notes if you want to call them that, so I can see some meaningful things here. In this case, it's by priority, or could be by health, or whatever you might want. And I can also even total things up on the Kanban board, like say budget or points or hours or whatever it might be that you want to see those totals across the different categories that we're looking at here. And it's all drag and drop, so I can simply update things just by dragging and drop and moving them around depending on how I set up my view here. As we're building out our portfolio and we're working on projects and we're creating those dependencies between different ones and such, then I might want to come into my roadmap view here and kind of see very clearly where things are laid out, when they're going to happen, what's the progress on them so far, dependencies between these. In this case, I have it grouped up here by business units so that we can see all of the different units here, accounting, human resources, IT, et cetera, and kind of organizing the different projects into those. We can come in, then we can color these, like for example, maybe I want to color this by priority, for example, and see how that all works. And then you can utilize this to better communicate your roadmap of what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. This could be, say, across the whole IT organization and or more than that, like you see here if you're more of a, say, EPMO. And what this is really good for is it's not just, again, your waterfall projects or your Agile projects, it's both of them all together automatically without you having to try to manually mush things together in PowerPoints, Excel files, whatever it might be, and really show that. From there, I can report on this, and we'll see some reports in just a second. There's also a print option in here if you just wanted to print this out and send it over to someone or share it or whatever it might be. So as you're working on all of these projects, whether they're Agile, waterfall, or hybrid, we need to give dashboards and reports and visibility into what's going on to leadership, to management, to stakeholders, etc. And so what I'm now looking at here is I'm in Power BI, another application part of the Office 365 stack, Microsoft's modern cloud reporting tool. And I'm looking at a dashboard here that we call our Agile PPM portfolio dashboard. And imagine I'm someone like, say, a manager who needs to look across all these different projects, waterfall, Agile, all of the above, and get an idea of what's going on. This is a great dashboard pre-built out of the box that you can start from to start seeing that information, getting visibility into what's going on. On the left-hand side, you can see metrics like portfolio cost, risk, ROI, more traditional waterfall types of metrics. But the cool part is this cost, for example, is not actually just my waterfall projects. It's the total cost of my entire portfolio, both waterfall, Agile projects, and not. Since we were using a common way to track costs around all of these, it's easy just to roll that all together and start getting more visibility into costs. If I scroll down here, we can do more traditional bubble charts, risk versus ROI, benefits versus cost, these types of things. We can get into project status, and we can even get into, say, resource availability across all of this different work that's going on, including operational work, by the way, help desk types of things, keep the lights on, that such, if you're loading that into the system as well. On the right side, though, we can see more traditional Agile metrics like sprint burnups or burndowns, bug trends over time, cumulative flow diagrams of user stories, velocity charts, whatever it might be that you want to track. We can get all of those metrics as well and have it all together in one place. So if I'm a manager, I don't have to go to Project Online to see, say, the waterfall reports and go over to Azure DevOps to see the Agile reports. I can come to Power BI and get every piece of information I need from these different systems in a meaningful way, all here together in one place. From there, if I want more information, I can click on any one of these. So for example, I could click on the project portfolio status report here. That will drill me into the full report kind of out of that just high-level dashboard. And now I can come in and I can get more details. Okay, I can see all my projects, the status of those projects, how far along are we on those projects? 4 of them are off track, 6 have overdue issues, 22 are behind schedule, et cetera, et cetera. I could filter this down if I went and just look at my Agile projects or just look at my waterfall projects, just using different filters in here, or just look at specific portfolios, programs, whatever it might be. And then using the tabs across the bottom, I can drill into all the different types of data that we may be tracking and may be interested in around these projects. So I can look at more of a timeline roadmap type view of things. I can come in and see, when everything is all laid out here. Just the same as I could look at it from more of a financial perspective and come in and look at the costs and view, budgets versus actuals and what's remaining and benefits and ROIs and so on and so forth. And you can also do these things over time, so we can show time phase cost or time phase resources over time, how we're burning. And all the way down into detailed issues, risks, change requests, whatever it might be. There's, say a full-on risk matrix in here that you can utilize if you're using these types of capabilities within the system to view into all the details that could happen. So with that, you can see how we can start up front doing some high-level, top-down planning from resource financials. We can go through an approval workflow process and use that portfolio analysis module I showed you to do prioritization and figure out if and when we can do things within our budgets and our resources. And then we can go and execute on the tool of choice, whatever makes sense for that particular project. Is it an Agile tool? Is it a waterfall tool? Maybe even both in a hybrid scenario, and report off of all this naturally without requiring anyone to double enter any information or do anything that's unnatural that they're not already doing today.